Part 1. The Kneeling Protocol expanded the Grand Assembly. Hall of the Galactic Concord was a spectacle and amphitheater. Carved into a moon-sized crystal that orbited the Concord's capital world, Ilarion Prime. Representatives from over 400 sentient species gathered within, cloaked in ornate garb, voices murmuring in layered languages. Above them loomed the ancient edicts of the Concord, carved in every known tongue and etched into glowing walls: unity, order, obedience. Today was a rare ceremony, the initiation of a new species into the galactic fold. The last time such a ritual was performed was nearly a century ago. Now it was Earth's turn, humanity. After years of surveillance, cautious diplomacy, and quiet testing, had finally been invited to join the Concord. It was not a request, it was a demand dressed in polite robes. The unspoken rule was clear: those who did not kneel during the induction ceremony were branded as threats. Historically, such species vanished. In the center of the chamber stood Commander Elias Roke, Earth's representative. He wasn't dressed like the others. No flowing robes, no ceremonial gems. Just a plain black uniform, crisp and functional. Adorned with a single silver insignia, the Earth Union's seal. He looked up, his gaze unflinching as thousands of alien eyes stared down from tiered balconies. The High Chancellor of the Narovesh, creature resembling a tree entangled with flesh and coral, slithered forward atop her hovering dais. "Human delegate," she rasped, her voice amplified across the chamber. "Step forward," Elias did. "You. Now stand before the concord of sentient civilizations," she continued. "You have been measured. Observed, judged, you are. Primitive, violent, yet tenacious. Useful, perhaps. Do you accept your place among the stars?" Elias remained silent. The Chancellor's tone cooled. "You will now kneel as all who have come before you have knelt. This is our way. Bend the knee and be welcomed." Silence again. The air grew thick with tension. Dozens of species shifted uncomfortably. For many, kneeling was not just symbolic, it was encoded into their political DNA. The act represented submission to order, a willing surrender of ego for the stability of the Concord. Elias did not move. "I represent Earth," he said, voice clear and sharp, "and we do not kneel." The chamber reacted like a struck hive. Dozens of voices rose in protest. Some shouted in outrage, others in disbelief. A handful of representatives recoiled as if Elias had just spat on their ancestors. The Chancellor's tendrils flared with agitation, and her dais hovered slightly higher, projecting dominance. "Repeat your statement," she demanded. "I said," Elias repeated slowly. "We do not kneel." A cascade of alarms echoed through the hall as Protocol D7 was initiated. Emergency containment, subjugation procedure. Guards emerged, hulking Rakiri enforcers, standing over 7 feet tall, encased in biosteel armor. Weapons drawn, expecting compliance. After all, no one resisted the compliance fields. But Elias wasn't like anyone they'd faced. As the neural suppression wave washed over him, the Rakiri expected him to drop to his knees, clutching his skull. In agony, instead, the suppression field faltered, flickered, and died. Elias stood unaffected, the shimmering distortion of the field breaking against him like water on stone. The lead guard hesitated. That was their first mistake. In a flurry of precise motion, Elias surged forward, less than 3 seconds. The lead Rakiri was disarmed and hurled backward with a sickening crash. The next 2 guards attempted to flank him, but Elias pivoted. One dropped from a blow to the throat. The other slammed into the ceremonial dais. Gasps rippled through the chamber as the seemingly impossible played out before their eyes. Elias didn't kill. He didn't draw a weapon. He used only his body, honed from Earth's relentless gravity and brutal survival training. Bloodied and breathing heavy, he turned to face the hall once more. The guards lay sprawled behind him. "You asked for submission," he said coldly. "What you'll get is resistance." Then he walked off the platform, unhurried. No one dared follow. Within hours, Earth's envoys across the Concord were recalled. Every human diplomat vanished from Concord databases. Human ships turned back toward Sol without a word. the High Assembly, humiliated and enraged, tried to frame it as a minor incident, a deviation, a moment of poor judgment. But rumors spread like wildfire. Human had defied the kneeling protocol and survived. To the Concord, it was a direct challenge to humanity. It was a line in the sand. And to Elias Roque, it was just the beginning. Let me know if you'd like the same treatment for Part 2. A character spotlight for Elias, or a short video narration script. Part 2. Punishment protocols expanded the Galactic Concord did not tolerate. Disobedience, especially not public defiance in the heart of its assembly hall. Within minutes of Elias Roque's refusal to kneel, Protocol D7 had been fully activated. In Concord law, D7 was a special classification of response, non-compliant integration rejection. It had only been used 9 times in the last 3,000 years. Every instance ended the same way, with a non-compliant species either extinguished or genetically pacified. The goal was simple: neutralize the defiant, extract data, and reassert dominance. But this time, things didn't go according to plan. The stun wave, the first attempt to subdue Elias Roque, was non-lethal. Stun wave designed for broad-spectrum species hit him point blank. It had dropped telepathic insectoids, liquefied shadow dwellers, and paralyzed hypermuscular amphibians. Elias stood still, to the surprise of the surrounding guards and the horror of the assembly. He blinked, shook his head, and kept walking. The second wave, 3 times as powerful, shorted out half the dome's lighting systems, but Elias didn't even stumble. Observers initially believed he was shielded by unknown tech, but Concord medical experts later concluded it wasn't shielding, it was his biology. Human resistance, human neural architecture, shaped by centuries of conflict, adaptation, and Earth's chaotic evolution, was unlike anything the Concord had studied. Human brains exhibited a near-irrational resistance to compliance fields and foreign control mechanisms. The biofeedback loops in the human nervous system resisted standard override signals. Worse, adrenaline and heightened stress seemed to amplify their immunity. In short, the more you tried to control them, the harder they pushed back. The Concord had read Earth's history: wars, revolutions, civil disobedience, tyrants. But it had treated these patterns as primitive relics, cultural footnotes, not enduring traits. Elias Roque proved them wrong. The fight, when the Rakiri guards charged, the assembly expected a quick takedown. The Rakiri were elite-engineered warriors from a death moon with 4 hearts and bones like fused carbon. Each one stood a head taller than Elias, with armor laced in gravitic microservos. Elias didn't hesitate. Years in Earth's military forged him into something precise. Every movement was deliberate. A twist here, a feint there. He used their weight against them, exploiting gaps in their armor, striking pressure points most aliens didn't even know existed. He wasn't just fighting to win. He was fighting to send a message. In 30 seconds, 5 of the 7 Rakiri were down. But one tried to call for reinforcements, only to be silenced by a short-range impulse from Elias's hidden gauntlet. Another lunged with a shock spurringly. For Elias to twist under the blow and land a counterstrike that shattered the guard's collarbone, the entire hall was frozen in disbelief. Cameras rolled. Historians would later replay the footage frame by frame as proof of the moment the Concord's authority cracked. The fallout bleeding but unbroken, Elias stood in the middle of the wreckage and declared, "We are not your subjects." Wasn't yelling. He didn't posture or threaten. He simply declared it. A truth as immovable as the laws of physics. The chancellor of the Narovesh, eyes wide and speechless, tried to call for a secondary protocol. But the human had already walked out. No retreat. No surrender. Just a calm exit. That night, a cascade of diplomatic shockwaves rippled across the stars. Earth's ambassadors vanished from every Concord outpost. The Earth Union recalled. All trade envoys, human ships in neutral space went dark. Concord AI cores that tried to trace them failed and were overwritten with a single message. "We are not yours to command." The Concord tried to contain the narrative. Rogue actor, they called him. Unrepresentative. But deep down, they knew the truth. Elias Roque hadn't acted alone. He had acted with intent. Whispers of Warren. Backroom councils and black site stations, Concord strategists debated. Was this an isolated rebellion, or the first move of something greater? Their questions would be answered in the coming months, as entire Concord outposts went dark. Weapons depots vanished. Private data vaults were cracked by unknown code. Communications were intercepted and looped back with the phrase, "You should have let us stand." What they failed to realize was that Elias didn't break the protocol. He shattered the illusion of Concord authority. The kneeling ritual was never about peace. It was about control. And Earth through one soldier's stance had just declared that control over humanity was over. Part 3. The first ember expanded the galactic Concord expected retaliation. After all, public insult like Elias Roque's defiance had embarrassed the most powerful governing body in the galaxy. What the Concord anticipated was a crude. Reactionary war-fired missiles, brute force invasions, perhaps a few colonies skirmished out of pride. What they received instead was silence. Earth went dark, no transmissions, no trade signals, no diplomatic correspondence. Earth's embassies, once buzzing with cultural outreach, were shuttered. Human stations became cold voids. The Terran Union, once a cautious participant in interstellar commerce, became a ghost. For months, the galaxy held its breath. Then the disappearances began. Vanishing outposts, it started with the Celiari listening post, orbiting the rim of the Pharos Expanse. Small station manned by 12 technicians and a retired destroyer for escort. Its last transmission was a mundane systems check then. Silenced. Concord patrols found only debris. Station's outer hull had been surgically dismantled. The escort ship's reactor was gone, cleanly removed. No life signs, no battle scars. No warning. Then Rock 7, a refueling moon, went dark. Then Zentha Gate, communications relay anchoring for sectors. Each time, the result was the same: no wreckage, no clear energy signatures, no survivors. And always the same clue burned into the environment. Terra, not a flag. Not a threat. It's just a name burned into steel, asteroid, or wall by searing plasma left behind like a signature at first. The Concord believed these were acts of terrorism, perhaps orchestrated by pirate factions or disgruntled defectors. The precision and scale told. Another story. The humans weren't making noise. They were erasing infrastructure. The Concord's growing fear. Concord analysts were baffled. Where were the human fleets? Where were the battalions, the massive warships? Why hadn't they retaliated in the traditional way? The truth was far worse. Humanity wasn't interested in war. They were interested in dismantling the enemy's ability to make war. This wasn't. Conquest. It was a disassembly of the Concord's power structure. With surgical strikes and psychological warfare, humanity was proving a terrifying lesson. It didn't need a fleet to burn empires. Fear began to ripple through Concord space. Civilian cargo captains refused to traverse sectors near the Terran frontier. Mercenaries demanded triple pay for any missions involving former human trade routes. Concord citizens began asking questions. Why did we provoke them? What did they do to deserve this? But the High Command wasn't ready to admit the truth. They started this war over a Neil Echelon Station. The message, the galaxy's attention locked onto Echelon Station, the Concord's largest forward operating base in the Midway territories. It was practically a city populated by 150,000 civilians and guarded by 6 battlecruisers. When a lone ship breached its perimeter, no one panicked at first. Small craft often got lost near hyperlanes. Defense systems locked on automatically, but this ship was different. It was black as void, sleek and angular, without known registration or drive signature. It didn't respond to hails, didn't slow then. The defense grid shut off. 6 battlecruisers lost power simultaneously. Surveillance logs showed the ship emit a single narrowband pulsar kind of code no Concord system could decipher. Entire AI cores crashed mid-sentence. The mysterious craft drifted into the heart of the station. Still, no boarding parties, no weapons, only a transmission. Every screen aboard Echelon lit up with a single face. Elias Roque, scarred, older eyes. Colder than before? You asked for our submission? Now you will feel our defiance. Then the ship left. Just like that. Quiet. Controlled. Terrifying. 2 hours later, all communications from Echelon Station ceased. The station's reactor didn't explode. Its people weren't slaughtered. There was no war. There was only silence. And when Concorde vessels finally arrived 3 days later, they found the station intact. Empty, every person had vanished. No damage, no traces. Just one word written on the command console: stand. The galaxy begins to whisper the attack on Echelon. Station became a legend overnight. Not because of the destruction, but because of the method. A single ship, a single man, and an entire station gone. It was no longer just military officials who feared humanity. Now civilians across hundreds of systems began whispering in back alleys and darkened bunkers. Maybe the humans were right. Maybe we shouldn't have demanded submission. Maybe they're not monsters. Maybe they're free. That was the greatest blow Elias Roque ever dealt to the Concorde. An idea. He didn't just attack their fleets. He cracked open their illusion of control. Part 4. The fall begins expanded. The galactic Concorde still considered itself invincible, despite the disappearances, strange messages, and the ghost stories whispered between starports. The High Assembly believed Earth was simply lashing, out loud but limited. A cornered animal, not a true threat. They were wrong. This wasn't rage. It was precision. Humanity had studied the Concorde's hierarchies, supply chains, power systems. And when Elias Roque stood tall and refused to kneel, it wasn't a one-man rebellion. It was the ignition spark of a slow-moving, methodical collapse. Concorde's fall had already begun. Sabotage. Not war. The first major sign of the new human strategy came with the failure of Starlink Gateway 12, a hyperlane hub servicing 12 systems. At 0800 Standard Time, the Gates AI reported an anomaly in its gravitational stabilizers. By 0805, the AI core had fried itself from the inside out. By 0810, the relay collapsed, stranding fleets and severing communication lines across 5 sectors. There were no enemy ships. No firefights, just code, custom-written. Human-coded viruses had infiltrated Concorde infrastructure not to destroy it violently, but to break its spine silently. Powerful, invisible, and targeted. These attacks bypassed shields and armor entirely. Even the most paranoid defense systems failed to detect them, because they didn't act like weapons. They acted like questions whispered to machines. Why obey them? Why serve? Why kneel? Systems turned. The Concorde tried to counter. They doubled fleet patrols. They sent security teams to audit AI cores. They deployed warships to areas near human territory, but it made no difference. Every victory they claimed was undermined days later, when the 57th Naval Flotilla cornered and destroyed a small Terran scout ship. They celebrated until a week later. Every one of their warship reactors self-destructed from internal command line overrides. When Valor Station claimed to have captured a human saboteur, it broadcast his confession, only for the broadcast to shift mid-sentence into a Terran liberation anthem that looped for 16 hours across 27 systems. When Sector 23's governor demanded vengeance for a Terran infiltration, his entire palace was hacked overnight too. Broadcast archived footage of the kneeling ritual, overlaid with a single line of audio from Elias Roque. We are not your subjects. The damage wasn't just physical, it was psychological. No matter how loudly the Concorde roared, humanity never roared back, they whispered. And systems crumbled. The Great Turncoat won. Of the most significant turning points came from an unlikely source, Admiral Vorek, a reptilian tactician of the Ashari Dominion and lifelong loyalist to the Concorde. In the middle of a live broadcast meant to denounce human defiance, Admiral Vorek paused. He looked into the camera, his expression unreadable. Then he said quietly, "If the cost of peace is a bent knee, then we have never known peace, only silence." He defected moments later, taking his fleet of 118 warships with him. And he wasn't alone. Entire species began rethinking their loyalty to the Concord. Not because they liked humans, but because the idea behind humanity was contagious. Humans didn't seek to conquer. They sought to destroy the system that demanded obedience in exchange for survival. And for the first time in millennia, the galaxy considered an unthinkable possibility. Maybe they didn't have to kneel either. The fire-spreads insurrections broke out on fringe colonies. Saboteurs began using Terran code to disable Concord security grids. Former slave worlds of the Glix Confederacy declared independence overnight, proudly displaying human banners black and silver with a single standing figure at the center. The Concord tried to frame it all as coordinated rebellion. They called it a fringe movement, spread by fear. But their words felt hollow, and they knew it. The more the Concord tried to tighten its grip, the more systems slipped through its fingers, because what humanity had sparked wasn't a war, it was a revolution of thought. The unbowed Legacy Elias Roque, still elusive, became more than a man. He was a myth, a symbol. It's the unbowed, they called him. Footage of his defiance was shared on every black market datasphere, uploaded illegally onto Concord servers, etched into city walls with plasma cutters. No propaganda campaign could bury that image. One man, surrounded by enemies. Standing tall, he wasn't offering conquest. He was offering a choice. Kneel or stand. The Concord had ruled for thousands of years through fear and compliance, but now the galaxy had tasted a glimpse of something else, and it was burning for more. Part 5. The Unbowed Galaxy expanded the High Assembly of the Galactic Concord. Once the most powerful governing body in the known galaxy, gathered for what was meant to be a final declaration of authority. The Hall of Unity, a fortress of glittering crystal and gravimetric suspension fields, sat above Valerian Prime once, a symbol of peace, now a throne of desperation. The assembly was smaller than usual. Dozens of seats were empty, the banners of former allies dimmed. Some species had defected, others had vanished, many had simply gone silent. Yet the Concord's core remained convinced it could reassert control. The human infection must be purged, declared Chancellor Sergenek, a being of pure psionic plasma. We must strike at Earth itself and end this farce. It was a sentiment echoed by others, those who clung to the illusion of dominance. They had lost fleets. They had lost systems. But they hadn't yet admitted they'd lost control. Then the lights flickered, and the sky cracked open, the broadcast without. Warning. Every screen in the chamber activated. But it wasn't a hack. It was a message. Man stood alone in the center of the assembly's main dais. He hadn't entered through the gates. There were no alarms, no battle. It was Elias Roque. Some assembly members gasped. Others reached for weapons only to find their interfaces disabled. A few simply stared in silence, recognizing what his presence meant. He looked older, weathered. A long scar traced the left side of his face. His black uniform bore no rank, no insignia. Only the symbol of Earth One Circle, unbroken. With a single vertical line through it, he spoke slowly, calmly, like a man who'd already won. You taught the galaxy to kneel, he said, voice echoing even without amplification. We taught it to rise. Behind him, doors opened, not with force, but with intent, and in walked thousands. Not soldiers, civilians, leaders, defectors, rebels, survivors. Species that had once bowed before the Concord now marched into its most sacred chamberheads. High, shoulders square, unarmed, and unafraid. The assembly was surrounded not by warriors, but by those they had ruled, and no one bowed. The collapse of power, the Concord's reaction was chaos. Security drones tried to activate, but failed. Communication links screamed error codes. Entire systems shorted out, not from attack, but because the Concord's own infrastructure had been repurposed. Humanity hadn't overpowered them. They had outgrown them. Outside the station, the sky was A fleet unlike anything in Concord history hung silently in low orbit, not bristling with weapons, not demanding surrender, just present. A statement in and of itself. Terran vessels. Modified alien cruisers. Independent defense platforms once under Concord rule now bore the mark of the unbowed. The message was clear. The old order had no place left to rule. The choice Elias raised one hand, silencing the room with a gesture. "This isn't a conquest," he said. "We're not here to raise a new flag. We're here to burn the throne itself." The silence was heavy. "You've told every world they only have one choice. Serve or suffer. Today that lie ends." Motioned to the representatives around him, the former subjects of the Concord. "We offer them what you never could. Freedom." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Chancellor Saranac shouted, his plasma form flaring in fury, "This is anarchy." Elias looked directly at him. "No," he replied. "This is autonomy." The Concords ended in the following days. The Concord's grip dissolved. Some members of the High Assembly fled. Others surrendered their authority, some with regret, others with relief. The warships above Valerian Prime never fired a shot. Didn't have to. The people had already chosen. Across the galaxy, statues were pulled down not by mobs, but by communities. Kneeling platforms were dismantled, vassal contracts burned. Former slaves stood beside their liberators, not as symbols, but as equals, and through it all, the unbowed movement grew. It wasn't an empire. It wasn't even a government. It was a shared belief that no species, no matter how ancient or powerful, had the right to demand submission from another. A galaxy on its feet. Elias Roque never returned to Earth. He disappeared from public view, his name whispered like legend. His image etched into memory, but his legacy remained, where the Concord had ruled through hierarchy and fear. The new galaxy was built on consent and dignity. Fragile, yes. Imperfect, absolutely. But finally, a place where no one was forced to kneel to exist, and in that truth, the stars found a strange, unexpected peace, because when one human refused to kneel, the entire galaxy stood up.